All right, so far I've got a nice little scratching sound here on track 1 with repitch and our frozen playhead. On track 2, got a nice little pad sound that we got from a drum sample using cycles and a frozen playhead. And now on track 3, I brought in another little fun sample here. And we're going to go to the textures mode, and we'll freeze the playhead and see what we can do with this. Now, the nice thing about textures, again, what we're doing is we are creating grains, tiny little loops, and as the playhead moves through the sample, we hear these loops being played. And depending on the grain size, it'll determine whether or not the time stretching that occurs sounds smooth or a bit more garbled, or if we could just completely change the timbre of the sample. Now, with the frozen playhead, depending on how we approach this, we can either get some very, very extreme time stretching by modulating the playhead position in a very slow manner. And again, this, with a relatively small grain size, can end up sounding relatively effective. But again, as a sound design tool, this is also great. Okay, now, once again, the keyboard tracking is off. I'm going to turn the keyboard tracking on. And right now I'm playing different pitches, but the different pitches don't affect the actual pitch that we're hearing, but they ultimately do affect the timbre of the sample. Because the grains are being affected by the pitch that we play. So with that said, I want to get some minor modulation happening with the texture playhead position. Now, since we use the LFO on the other one, I'm going to go ahead and open up my modulator here. And I think what I'd like to do instead is maybe use the steps modulator. And I want to get this to move in a very nice rhythmic way. Let's go ahead and open this up. I'm going to assign the steps modulator to the playhead position right now. And I'll put this somewhere in the middle. So that's currently what we're going to hear. I'm going to go ahead and just randomize this. And if we play this right now. So I'm going to change this to eighth notes. And I think I'd like to smooth this. And I want to play with the grain size a bit here. That's pretty interesting. Okay, this has turned into something completely different. I like it. I like it. Now, if you remember from before, if we adjust the motion control here, the playhead is going to sound like it's jittering around the playhead position. I'm not sure if this is going to result in something useful for this particular sound, but we might as well try it and just see how much it changes what we're dealing with. Now, with the grain size this large, increasing the motion parameter actually has a pretty pleasing effect. Now, if we make the grain size smaller with the motion up the way it is, that's when we start to get that grain cloud, stormy kind of sound. But I think what works pretty well is a rather large grain size and a good amount of motion here. Okay, that's pretty cool. So that'll be a good starting point for us. And again, we can always apply effects and whatnot after the fact. And at some point, we're going to get to this filter. But let's just see how we can incorporate this in what's currently going on. I'm going to go ahead and unmute track 2. Now, for some reason, this particular sound is sharp or flat, as opposed to just transposing it. I can always detune it by adjusting the sense parameter here. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. All right. Okay, so now that we're pretty familiar with the different modes here and how we can affect them by freezing the playhead or not, let's go ahead and dive deeper into the sampler instrument.